I have spent 38 years inside the mapping hall at Orland Station, and in all that time I have only ever drawn one line. The assembly likes to say I maintain it. That is not quite true. I watch it. The line maintains itself. It runs along what the old surveys called the pale verge, a stretch of dim stars at the edge of human territory, where the light behaves the way light should not behave, thin, reluctant, swallowed before it reaches very far. The mapping hall renders it the same way the old surveyors did, a band of stars drawn a shade duller than every other band on the chart, not because the instruments measure them as duller, but because the first cartographers who tried to survey that stretch in true brightness found their own apprentices refusing to look at the finished chart for more than a few seconds at a time. We have kept the dimmer rendering ever since. It is the only concession the hall makes to superstition, and I have never once been asked to correct it. Nothing about the verge looks dangerous. That is the first thing every new cartographer learns to distrust. The danger of that stretch of sky is that it looks like nothing at all, no debris field marking a battle, no abandoned stations marking a retreat, no scorched system marking a war the conquered lost and chose to forget. Just stars, dimmer than they should be, and a silence that has held for longer than any of our institutions have existed to hold it. For 2 generations, the conquered has held its ships back from it without needing to be told twice. We did not learn this the easy way. The story is short, and the assembly does not like to hear it told plainly, so I will tell it plainly here once, because I was asked to, and because I am tired of watching us forget on a schedule. 26 years ago, the Concord was short on yield-bearing systems and long on appetite. A young captain named Sale Myron, sharper than I was at her age, and braver than was good for her, petitioned the assembly for clearance to survey 3 systems just inside the verge, close enough to the old margin that her petition called it adjacent unclaimed space, rather than what it was. She had come up through my own training rotation a decade earlier, one of 3 cadets I considered worth the effort of arguing with, and the only one who ever won an argument with me outright. She was not reckless. I want that understood. Reckless captains do not survive long enough to command a survey vessel of their own, and Myron had commanded the open question for 6 years without losing a crewman. She believed, with the particular confidence of someone who has never personally been proven wrong, that the verge's silence was a fact waiting to be explained, rather than a warning waiting to be respected. I had trained her myself. I told her what every cartographer before me had told every captain who asked. The line is not a suggestion, and nothing that has crossed it in living record has ever sent a second message home. She said the silence past the line was exactly the argument for going. If something were truly there, she said, it would have announced itself by now. Silence, to her, was an empty room, not a held breath. The assembly granted her petition in a single session. I voted against it and was outvoted in the same hour. I am telling you this so you understand that what I am about to ask you to do, you have refused me before. Her vessel, the open question, crossed the verge on a standard approach vector, running full telemetry, broadcasting position at the agreed interval. For the first 9 hours the logs read exactly as every survey log reads: distance, drift, the dull poetry of instruments doing their work. At hour 10 the broadcast interval held. At hour 11 it held again. At hour 12 there was nothing to hold because there was no transmission to receive, and there has not been one since. We do not know what happened to the open question. I want to be exact about that, because exactness is the only authority I have left in this hall. We do not know. We sent 2 recovery vessels along her exact heading, instructed to turn back at the first sign of anomaly, and they did turn back and they found nothing. No wreckage, no drift field, no debris signature consistent with structural failure, weapons discharge, or any catastrophe our instruments are built to recognize. The open question did not explode and did not break apart and did not, as far as any sensor could determine, stop existing in any way physics is willing to describe to us. She simply went somewhere our telemetry could follow her into, and did not follow her back out of. The recovery captains were thorough, more thorough than their orders required. One of them held position at the margin for 19 hours past her authorized window, running every passive scan the vessel carried, hopping for a signal, a debris ping, anything that would let her write a report with an ending in it. She wrote instead that the stars along that stretch did not look any dimmer through her own optics than the chart had led her to expect, and that she found this, in her own words, harder to sit with than if they had looked worse. I do not say this to frighten the assembly. I say it because it is the only honest description available to me, and because the alternative, inventing a cause we can name and therefore manage, is how a polity convinces itself a closed door is merely unlocked. The mapping hall withdrew nothing after that. We did not need to. The line had already been correct. What we did instead was confirm it, mark the date, and add Sale Myron's name to a registry that exists for exactly this purpose and that I hope none of you have ever had reason to read. The registry is older than the hall itself, kept in a script 3 reforms out of date, and it does not editorialize. It lists a name, a vessel, a heading, and a date, nothing more. I have read it more times than I will admit, not because it tells me anything new, but because it is the only document in this station that has never once been revised to sound more comfortable. It is a short registry. That is the only mercy in it. I have given variations of this testimony 4 times now across 4 assembly sessions, each time because some new petition has arrived dressed in the language of necessity, resource pressure, strategic positioning, the argument always that the silence past the line has gone on so long it must by now mean safety rather than restraint. I understand the appetite. I have felt it myself. I am only the keeper of a record that says the appetite has never once been rewarded. Today's petition is larger than Myron's was. It does not ask for 3 systems adjacent to the margin. It asks the Assembly to formally reclassify 40 light minutes of the verge as a development corridor, on the stated basis that 26 years without incident constitutes evidence of an empty sector rather than an unbroken line. I want the record to show that I told this Assembly, in this hall, exactly what 26 years of silence has actually meant every time silence has been mistaken for absence before. It has never once meant absence. It has meant that nothing has been sent in to test it since. The vote, when it came, was not close. I will not pretend I expected otherwise. The corridor was approved, the petitioners thanked for their patience, and the session adjourned with the particular cheerfulness of a body that has just made a decision it will not personally have to answer for. I was thanked, too, for my diligence, in the tone reserved for an old instrument that has been consulted out of courtesy rather than need. I came back to the mapping hall alone, the way I always do after these sessions, and I stood for a long while in front of the chart where the verge is rendered as a band of stars dimmer than the rest, the cartography honest even when the assembly is not. I did not redraw the line. There was nothing wrong with it. I marked the date of the new corridor's first survey launch in the hall's record, the way I marked Myron's launch 26 years before it, in the same column, in the same hand. The mapping hall keeps no opinions. It keeps dates. Someday a new keeper will stand where I am standing and find 2 entries close enough together to draw a line of their own between them, and they will not need me to explain what it means. The verge has never once needed a second invitation. It has only ever needed the assembly to forget that the first one was answered. I will be here when the corridor's survey vessel crosses. I will log her broadcast interval, the way I logged Myron's, and I will not be surprised by whichever hour the interval stops holding. The line has never required my permission to do its work. It has only ever required our patience to stop pretending the work was already finished.